Dr. Lua does not speak on behalf of the university, neither does she speak on behalf of UMI. All opinions that are shared are her personal opinions and observations, and should be taken as such. If you have a query, if you have an issue, please contact the faculty directly or contact UMI and ask to speak to either Dr. Lua, or if you're in third, GEMP 4 and 3, speak to your coordinator about your exclusion. But the opinions shared here are not to be used as the only way or the set way that things are to be said. These are just the opinions of two people and the experiences. Thank you. So that brings us to the next question, which is, so what happens to excluded students and what are we supposed to do now?
Sure, that's a tough question. Because where does the responsibility lie? What are the next steps? What do you, who does what? And it's not just by you've been excluded. So I think there's the role of the academic in this process, because just as like the student joined the program, there was the role of the academic, the role of the student, and the role of the people at home. Even in the exit of the student, there has to be those roles. And unfortunately, the role of the academic is to say, you haven't, at this point, you haven't made it in the program, but then also, what are your choices or what are your options within academia, within studying still? And maybe the role of the academic and the responsibility is to say, who do I know in other faculties? And the student may not be ready for medicine now, but they can join a BSc program and then, come back into the program, or join a law degree and actually become a lawyer, or like I said, be a drama student, be an actress. So I think the responsibility of the university and the academics is to create a network that doesn't completely exclude students. So you have been excluded from this program, but you're not completely excluded, and make it an easy network. So there's some students who, I remember last year, this one student said, oh, I thought I'd been excluded from the university. And I had to explain to him, no, you've been excluded from the faculty, and it's for this moment in time. It's for a year, it's not forever. You can go and apply to different spaces. So it's making exclusion, which we spoke about, explicit. What does it really mean when I say you've been excluded? And what are my options? What are the options of an excluded student? And how can we facilitate that process as academics? So it's us to make networks and us to say to the student, okay, here you are, and then to say to them, do you have that support, right? So I often sit in meetings and they'll say, okay, the students can do this, this, and that, or this student needs to come back next year, or this student can't do X, Y, and Z. And then you think, well, have you thought about the personal implications, the financial implications that for this particular student or this group of students? Because WITS is so beautiful and blessed that it has a diverse group of students. But then that also means that we as academics or an institution need to think diversely when dealing with the student. So it's then finding out, so as an academic, I would say, having that responsibility internally, but also finding out what support structure the student does have, and saying, okay, cool, you've got a support structure, then the next step is maybe, and I'm thinking about this now, empowering even the support structure in a way. And I'm not sure how this will work or look, but I'm just thinking about last year, I had a student who was excluded, and his mother called me, and she said to me, what can I do? What should he do? And I remember sitting on the phone and saying, okay, you could call the Faculty of Science, you could call the Faculty of, I was listing things to her. But at the same time, my mind is thinking, okay, I need to get this, this, and this done. So I didn't have the time for that. So in a nice way. So maybe the thing is to create a department,
SOP for exclusion.
Yeah, for exclusion, and then have people work in that space because of the biggest implication. Like, it has such big implications for someone's life, right? Because I remember at the end of last year, I was tasked with, people were failing, as you know, people failed third year and fourth year, and this hasn't been done before. But I decided I'm going to send an email to every student who failed. A personal email is going to be like, I just put your name there, and it had what the exclusion, what the codes meant. It had what the cancellation, like what it means when
it makes such a difference.
Exactly.
I went to a notice board that said MNMR. There was a star. I looked at the bottom. It was very vague.
Yeah.
Which is why I went in there.
Yeah. And this is where being a student for me helped, because I also joined. I just got this job 2 years ago, and I joined and I thought, what is MRNM? What does this mean? Oh, here is a form that tells me what it means. Let me share it. Oh, at the beginning of the year, you get a conditions letter. Let me share it. Oh, this is what it means. And I knew it would take time, but I didn't want the student who had failed not to know what the next step. So because people just go blank, and So I think it's having a dedicated team that deals with that.
Because right now the responsibility is shared among faculty administration and you as UMI, the unit that runs 3rd and 4th years, and 6th, 5th, and 6th. But it's not. Even in the letter that you were referring to, the condition letter, I can promise you it hasn't been read in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I signed a letter that is not applicable to my situation.
And I looked at that at the end of last year when we were sending out, because what happens, and what's really great, like you guys, my kids, you always send me an email and say, this doesn't make sense to me. What is this about? And I'll read it and I say, well, actually you're right. Let me update this. Let me change this, right? So that's the power of that easy communication. And I did read that letter. And then that letter comes from higher up.
Yes.
What you do, you say, okay, guys, can we restructure this? So what I end up doing often is I just restructure it internally. So I write a, letter. I'm busy revising the conditions letter. And then I'll send it to my HOD and say, please look at this. And then she'll send it up to, so that it makes sense for your condition, right? Why are you coming back and on what condition? But as you said, there's no team of people that only deals with that.
To this.
And that's what we need.
Yes.
Just like we have an Office of Student Success that deals with certain issues for students.
Absolutely.
This is, and not just in medicine.
Actually, this is a conversation I think should have happened at this 30 years ago. Why are we excluding people, but it's being done by administrative staff who deal with admin?
Exactly. And maybe, you know what? So to be honest, let's think about it pragmatically. Maybe it helps to take away the emotion of it.
It does.
Because you sit there and there's this, like we spoke about failure to fail. It's heart-wrenching. You sit here, I remember sitting in this exact room with that student and I'm trying to tell him there are things he can do, but I also feel so helpless because I can't, beyond saying this is what the situation is, what can I do, right? And I think, as I said earlier, what would empower me is if I said, I'm having a meeting with you. Here are the list of the places you can go to. This may not all work out, but at least I have helped where I could. I didn't just say to you, you've been excluded.
There are options.
You go to the faculty and they, they'll help you. Maybe not. So yeah, it should be administrators, but it should be, I think, a team of people who are dedicated, who are able to sympathize, but are also able to say, this is the fact, the fact of the matter.
Perhaps another perspective, having a team. I don't know why they didn't think of this earlier. Oh my goodness. I'm getting on this.
Yeah.
Having a team responsible for exclusion affairs. First of all, it means that they will be experienced in it. They will have the network for it. And apart from just the administration of actually calling a student in and letting them know what has happened, it means that they can then also facilitate. I doubt that Prof. Wadi could have met with me and the 20 other students and our mothers.
Right.
I had to go home.
Right.
I woke up in the morning, I was going to school. My mom knew I was going to school. I came back after school and I had to call her because she's in another province and explain that I had been called in, not to be checked on, but to be told to go.
Yeah.
And my student card was going to be deactivated in a week. So there's not even time. Yes, yeah. It's not even grief. You go into absolute fight or flight mode. But having an administrative team means that there is somebody to engage the students, the parents, and to empower them to not look at it. Because so many, if you go to the channel, you'll see under the exclusion video, there's so many people who say, I fell into drinking, I fell into drugs. I'm now on grants. I mean, somebody who qualified to do medicine, she got in, she passed, she got excluded 3rd year, and now she is a mom of 3 at home on grants. The potential in that student, had it just been nurtured or redirected,
and the potential still in that student, like if you're watching and listening, there's potential still in that person.
Absolutely.
Right? It doesn't just dissolve, but as you said, having a unit for exclusion affairs, just like you guys know, if I have an issue, I can come to the academic administration. Okay, I've been excluded, I can go to that unit, and you know what it would do, it would change also the way,
stigma.
Yeah, exactly. The complete stigma of it, and allow for,
oh my god, we're copyrighting this. This has to pay.
I know.
It's brilliant.
It is. And it would also help the student and the academic to say, but I'm not just leaving you, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying here is help within the space. Yes. And I can still follow up. I can say to the people in that department, well, how's the student? What's going on? Because there have been a few students who have said, like, email me. Please email me on your personal email. There was a student who got excluded last year and I said, I just want to know how you're doing. And I mean, she hasn't emailed me, but that's the thing. I can then follow up with people.
Yeah.
So we've come up with this thing, and I think it's great.
Definitely have to meet a faculty member now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should do 2 or 3 more questions. Right. Shortest answers you can manage.
Okay.
Is academic exclusion rising in medicine? In medicine adverts, I guess.
I wouldn't know. I don't know if it's rising compared to other years. And
okay, so let's do the last 2 years, 3rd and 4th year. Because I know you have the stats.
Has exclusion increased? No.
It's the same or reducing?
I think it's the same. I would say it's the same. So I'm saying this because the last 2 years is COVID years, right? And so we've had it's very different years, and also a lot more compassion than we've had, or that's been shown previously. It's been, okay, what can we do to help the student, because it's been a difficult I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. So I would say the same, but I'd also say there's a lot more understanding and compassion, as opposed to the student is not coping, let's kick them out. But I stand to be corrected. Yeah.
So do you think, and I think this is really tough, because this then requires that communication with the student post-exclusion, but the question was, in your experience, does academic exclusion have the desired impact on student behavior? Maybe it's in student behavior because they're only the students still studying versus...
God, this is tough.
This
is tough. So is it, are we achieving, the question is, are we achieving the academic,
the desired impact on student behavior? So
no. So my answer is no to that question, because I think the desired behavior is for somebody to, or the intention is for the student who's excluded to go out and find themselves. But there's an age, like between, I don't know, like 20 and 30 and 20 and 35, when you're discovering yourself anyway, and you're trying to hold on to any bit of identity, and this is it. And then somebody says to you, you're not part of this identity. Go find your identity. How? What are the tools, right? I mean, students come into this degree and they start using medical terms in everyday life because it just becomes a part of them, right?
The ones who wear scrubs everywhere when they're not even in clinical
Exactly. So I don't think it's
no
achieving.
Shade.
But maybe, I don't know. But they're comfortable. Scrubs, I don't think if it's achieving its intention.
Yes.
Because the intention is for you to go find yourself, go find something else. And it's not achieving that because there's no support for the student to do that.
Very true.
So yeah, that's the answer.
Where do we access additional information concerning academic exclusion in the health science faculty? This will be specific to WITS.
Yeah, so I think there is in the rules and regulations that we have the Faculty of Health Sciences rules and regulations.
The calendar.
No, not the calendar, that's the almanac. But there's an actual thick book that's like Faculty of Health Sciences syllabus. And I think there may be now an electronic copy. But that should be available on the Faculty of Health Sciences website. So can I just tell you this? I remember when I started, I had never seen there's a standing orders on assessment, and basically that's just like the rules and regulations regarding assessment. And the opening line, or one of the opening lines of that document, is students and staff must have access to this, and it's been in existence since I was a student. And what I started doing was sharing that with students. And you don't realize how much it empowers the students just to read that and say, oh, this is what an assessment should be like, know. So these things are there, but we just don't know where they are, right? So just like you're saying, you've never seen it. But yeah, that should be in the Faculty of Health Sciences.
So check the website.
Yeah, but I could also make it available to you, so you can put it somewhere on this
I can
page.
link a PDF.
Exactly.
Alrighty. I think we've covered all. Oh, okay. There's one more, which is a little spicy.
Okay.
It says, is the appealing process, and appealing, basically, if you don't know, exclusion is when they let you go. When you want to come back, you can then appeal to state your case. Maybe it was special conditions or life happened and the reason why you didn't do well is valid. That's an appeal. So the question is the appealing process transparent, and who decides what's sufficient to be readmitted? This was asked by somebody who appealed and never got a response.
Okay. So
got a response, but the response was we're not even considering your appeal.
Okay, so is it transparent? No. I'm gonna be honest, I've never sat on the committees.
No?
I've never sat on those committees, so yeah, but I just having known the spaces that we operate in and knowing the systems we operate in, I would say no. And also knowing that you're dealing with human beings, so it's not a robot. You don't submit something to a robot and the robot does the calculation and says yes or no. You're submitting it to human beings who know faces, know names, don't know faces, don't know names, and in a committee then decide, right? So the hope is that this committee that constitutes students as well as faculty members is balanced enough to fight and say, yes, a student should stay, or no, a student cannot be readmitted, excuse me. That's the hope, but we're dealing with human beings.
True.
And so the reality may not be that.
Sure. Yeah. And then the end of that question was, who decides what's sufficient to be readmitted?
That committee. So there's a committee called the WITS Readmission Committee,
Yes.
WRC, and they have two processes. So WRC 1 is where students write in a letter that says we want to appeal to come back, and that is read amongst the committee, right? So it's not, nobody comes in to speak. And if a student's application needs a little more backing or doesn't make sense, then the committee decides that the student comes and must present. And so then they come in, and I believe they have a representative that comes in with them.
Yes.
So somebody from the SRC or somebody from the MSc, the Medical Students Council, will come in and speak on the student's behalf, and they present in front of the committee. So those are the people that
I think it's going to come down to, if ever this conversation is going to make it to the highest boards of faculties, it's going to take very mature and very open-minded people to acknowledge the need, to acknowledge the wrongs, and to want the change. Because the greatest opposition to a cause are the people who refuse to see its relevance. And the people who can make the changes, or the people who can get the ball rolling. But as long as they don't see exclusion as something that is harmful or that could be less harmful, there will never be a move towards progression in any field, and not just in medicine. So that's the difficulty. Humans.
And it depends on the person who's at the top's agenda. It depends on the system's agenda. It depends. There's a lot.
And do you find with academia, now that you're in academia, that people adopt the culture in the same way medical students, a lot of us adopt the fraternity as our identity. So if somebody says something bad about medicine, you're saying something bad about me.
Somebody said something bad about medical doctors 2 days ago, a friend of mine, and I was touched. But then I was like, but that's just the ego. So I had enough self-awareness to say, that's just the ego, and what you're saying is true. But it does become your identity, because if you've joined as a graduate, it's all you've wanted to do, right? So that's why you've pursued. Most graduates have studied, unless you did something else, you've lived your life, and then you say, maybe I can do medicine. But it's always been at the back of your mind. And if you've joined as a school leaver, this is all you know, right? Your formative years, high school, and here. So, sorry.
It's okay.
So it becomes your identity. It becomes who you are. It becomes, even when you have conversations, I think I've said this to you before, you have conversations and you're speaking medical jargon in ordinary conversation, because that's what university is. They are also, the years here are so formative. They form you, similar, a little bit less than your early years, but it is so formative.
Definitely.
It's giving you the identity of lawyer, doctor, accountant, anthropologist.
Suddenly you have a profession from a high school child.
Exactly. And what's the first thing when somebody wants to know about you? What do you do?
Exactly.
What's your name?
Where do you fit in society's hierarchy?
Exactly. So a lot of like that. Do I get touched when people speak bad about academia or the university space? Sometimes I do, and I think I do because I understand
the effort,
the work that goes into it, and also understand the pushback that comes from the top. If let me make this example. If, for example, students want something, and I'm like, that makes sense, and then I take it to my senior management or whoever, and they say, no, that wouldn't work. And I'm like, I understand that it's not because of me or because of the next person. It's because someone else has an idea or a vision for this program, and they say no. But I also understand the effort and the time that goes into it, and maybe that not being appreciated from either way. Also true. Not just from the students, but also from the academics, management. So sometimes get offended, but it's because now I have a clearer picture of both sides, exactly.
Of both worlds, very different worlds.
Exactly.
So that's partially why I think this conversation is going to be difficult. Because when you say the university, the dean takes it personally. When you say the faculty,
the dean takes it personally. When you say the school, who are you speaking about? When you say Yumi,
you are Yumi, walking around these passages. This is Yumi personified.
That used to frustrate me 2 years ago when I got this job. The students would, and this was now COVID time, so it was disaster. And the students would often say Yumi, Yumi, Yumi. Even now they say Yumi, and I got to a point where I was so frustrated. I said, when you say Yumi, who are you speaking about? You need to mention a name, because then it makes sense to me. Because then you can say, Dr. Lulua needs to do this.
I emailed Yumi. Yumi is like a unit of how many people? Yeah,
Dr. Lulua needs to do this. Be specific, because then I know you're directing it to me. But when you say Yumi, you're pushing me into something that I had a conversation about this with my colleague. it depersonalizes me, dehumanizes me.
Yes.
And then you can attack Yumi.
Yes.
Because it's nobody else. It's just, it doesn't have a face or a name. But then I also had an insightful conversation with a student once. And this was one of the benefits of being a student here and being Black, being female, just having that connection and the relatability. I asked the student, I said, when you say Yumi, who are you speaking about? Just tell me. And the student said, I'm speaking about the system. And I had a moment where like a light bulb went off and I was like, okay, you're speaking about the system. So I'm taking it personally. It's not about me.
No.
But I
something
function
you're a
in
part
the system.
of.
Yes, I do function in the system. When the system is moving, it's because part of my foot is like, making the wheel go around. And so it helped me because then it said, because I often say this to students, I often say, here's a system going on. And you just have to learn how to function in the system. And when a student said, we're talking about the system, I was like, okay. I still get touched a little bit, but I know that it's something else. Because when I was a student, there was also a system.
Yes.
And even now as an academic, I
There's
understand that there's a
still,
system, not just for the students, but also for academics. There's a system.
Everybody falls in somewhere. You are caught in somebody's watch.
Oh my goodness, exactly. There's a system I'm working in that's not...
That you find there. It pre-exists you.
Exactly.
Which is I think the biggest challenge when conversations of transformation have to happen. Unless the faculty members watching this, and we know you're watching, unless they choose to identify the problem, the intrinsic problem with policies they didn't write, policies they found there,
yes,
as well as how they have just decided to go with it, when they are the only ones with the ability to change or to introduce anything new or to edit
or to voice
or to even remove the red tape. If the problem is the fact that there's just so much red tape around this thing, you remove it. It's you. Me, I can't. I can just shoot YouTube videos.
But that's why I loved, and it was so tragic, but that's why I loved 2020, because out of the blue, red tape could be removed. Oh, you want to do this? Okay, let's do it. Oh, you want to do this? Okay, let's do it. So it shows that it can be done, but people just...
But there has to be a pandemic.
Exactly. It can only be done.
There has to be a tsunami or a flood or a drought, or Satan himself must be at your gate.
Or you must be out there.
We must burn buildings to get what we want.
But red tape it's been created by man.
Yeah.
Why can't man was not created for the red
God
tape.
God didn't give us policies. They didn't come on tables of stone.
Yes.
And they are unchangeable. It can only be the finger of God that says there is no exclusion committee, or that says that they must be.
Yes. And sure. I think maybe, and I'm just thinking this now as we're speaking, maybe one of the fears of removing red tape is that people who were under that red tape before will come back and say, but when I was there, it wasn't allowed. So why are you letting it happen for the next group of people, right?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Because
it does.
So and I'm thinking of a personal example. We had red tape last year, specific to do with tracks, specific to do with you cannot fail. And we were sitting in a meeting with some people, and two of us in that meeting were like, but this doesn't make sense. We wanted to fight it. Eventually, it was agreed that we could lax the screws a little bit, and we would change the condition for passing. And it went through our head of department and the head of school, and it was, accepted.
At all levels.
Exactly. But then came into the new year, and the students who were under the previous rule then said, well, why is this being implemented now? Because I would have then made it if this was implemented before. And so you fight for the change, and you fight for the red,
and then the people in the system themselves then also fight to have the conditions
but
upheld.
Understandably so, because then it shows that there's a flaw in the system. Right? So then it's also, if I say this must be changed because it's injustice,
but we must make change slowly. It's so hard to implement change. I understand this on a policy level and on a management level. Apart from the policy itself, which is consistent, the policy does not change. It's there, it's in a book. But dealing with people who read and interpret it differently, and then dealing with people who experience its effects, bringing that on the table, and then eventually finally getting something that we can all agree with and implement into the policy. And then the people who were previously wronged now want to come back. It's too late.
Yeah. And you can only all agree if you all, and maybe not all agree, but you can all
have a
reach an
consensus
agreement if you all understand. And if there's no understanding, why must I agree with that? Because this doesn't make sense to me. And then it takes us back to everyone must be around a table and understand something. But
but don't I don't know any other word for this, but don't cock block for the next person. I don't know how else
that's
to
the
say
word.
that. Please. I mean, it's good enough that the change has happened. Take that in your stride.
Sure.
And choose. I'm not gonna go and fight Dr. Mujaji for my 47 and say, but now you guys give, what do they call those marks? Those 2% marks that they can give.
Condoning.
Yes.
Condoning.
They don't condone.
Oh,
in
okay.
2010, 2009. It was still very rigid, and academia was the aim. But I can't, now that there's condoning, go and fight something in first year. I have acknowledged that experience. I am happy it's changed, and I'm not the standard of good and bad either. And now I'm moving into third year, and I'm addressing problems here.
Yeah.
And I'm continually moving so that the people who come behind me would have a better system to go through.
It's hard to think like that, because that requires introspection and awareness. It's hard to think like that.
Also true.
Yeah. And also, I mean, when you are a student or even an adult, I don't know, your life is here, like this little pinpoint, and it's what serves me. So it's hard to think the
Also
way you're
true.
thinking.
Literally, you are main character of your own story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we've come to the end of our questions. I'm going to read a quote from Anonymous. Dr. Lou has already heard this quote. I emailed it to her.
Yeah.
But it's from somebody who commented on the Exclusion video, which I will link in the description box, and I'll put a card this side so that you can go watch the video if you haven't. But basically, Anonymous says that a one-size-fits-all policy is unlikely to be adequate for the type of complex challenges that the youth of today face. There is a need to get the balance right between high standards versus inclusion, competition versus attainment, and between rigorous training and student well-being. Being academically excluded mid-pandemic has left me abandoned and discarded. Accountability measures like exclusion should be accompanied by holistic measures like mental well-being support, parental engagement, and transitional support.
Yeah.
Which I think so beautifully summarizes the conversations and the thoughts that happened here. Things that we too saw a need for, if only the right people also saw the need. While maintaining the integrity of the profession, while maintaining the care, the highest quality of care for the patient, but also acknowledging that the student also needs to be cared for.
Yeah, the student is also a patient, right? You've said this. You're taking care of a life, but you're also, like, there's also another life. There's two lives, so multiple lives that we're thinking about.
And if you care enough for the student, you can guarantee that the patient will be cared for. So perhaps the focus of medical school also needs some, I don't think it needs to transform as a whole, like we need to change it up as well, no. But we need to adjust the perspective to widen. The perspective is good. I'm not trashing medical school or how the training is done, but it needs to be just widened enough to include well-being of the student.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to someone speak on this, and he said that the amounts of anxiety that high school students experience now, in the 1950s, somebody would get admitted to hospital for that anxiety. And so mental health has just rapidly, and I think there are various reasons for mental health being so, there's a lot of awareness around it, but also there's been a deterioration in mental health. And so it is something that is happening now, that and transformation often speaks to what things need to be transformed in the now. And one of those things is the mental health. How do we integrate it into the medical program to make it relevant, but also that we're aware of it, but also to support the student, support the academic in supporting the student. What are the things that we can do? And so definitely in terms of transformation, mental health in the medical faculty, the medical program is very big, especially in a space where this fraternity, this culture there's extreme stress, there's extreme pressure, there's extreme everything. Everything
responsibility.
Right, it's high stakes. You're dealing with a lot of high stakes, and so we do need to be considering that at a high level.
So yeah, maybe it is right for us to suggest. I mean, it's pointless for these conversations to happen, but not to filter or impact elsewhere. And perhaps somebody's watching this and saying, yeah, but what now? A lot of things have been suggested, a lot of things have been thought of, a lot of ideas, and this is within just about a 2-hour session. Imagine what could happen with more minds, with more experience, more perspectives, and people who genuinely acknowledge but don't want to destroy the system, but who want to better it, loosen the cogs. And the ones that need to be tightened, tighten the cogs. Get the machine to function at its highest capacity for the best of the student as well as the best of the patient. And management. Nobody wants to work in an environment where you're constantly feeling this or opposition.
Yeah.
And everybody gets tired. It's a Herculean task. Is it a Herculean task?
Yeah, I think that's the right word.
The guy who pushes the stone up and never reaches the top.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. So positive change is required, and for the student, exclusion does not mean you are less than, and it does not mean that you are not capable. The fact that you got in speaks for itself.
Yeah.
It just might mean not right now, and I don't want positive toxic positivity where we just boost you up and be positive. Medicine might actually really not be your strength, and look into other things, explore. And if you do and you find yourself unsatisfied, come back, try again, try somewhere else. There are so many options open to you, and I really do hope that this conversation gives you some kind of understanding and closure, but also affirms your self-worth and your value as a student in this qualification and this degree. With that, I think we're done. Thank you so much, Dr. Lua, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
She is going to send me a couple of things that I need to link so that you guys have access to. I'll also try and find them by myself so that you can have this sooner. But yeah, all the resources we can master are in the description box, as well as the contact numbers for OSS, which is for WITS students, WITS medical, not just medical, all the Faculty of Health students have access to the OSS, which is a counseling service. And yeah, that's all from my side that I could possibly do, but I really hope you well. If you are appealing, all the best, and if you're writing exams, go study. Turn this off, go study. Good luck, champ.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Nothing else from me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for
coming. I appreciated this space so much.
Bye guys, and see you in the next video.